Hi, this one is my book review, another book review I'm doing for Arnold Schwarzenegger's biography, Total Recall. So I just finished reading the book. It took me about 5 days, and it's the first book I've been reading using this speed reading app. So I'm going to do another post on that. But yeah, great book, and quite a lot to go through. So I just want to cover off some of the things I picked up from that and share that. Obviously, Arnold's story is quite incredible. You know, he came from a very poor family in Austria post World War II. His parents were very strict. Didn't have a lot growing up. Family struggled to feed themselves. That typical kind of poverty story. And then he went from that to being, one of the richest Hollywood actors in the world, and obviously governor of California. So a multi-million-dollar man, and that's a lot of success. I didn't really understand his story properly from the newspapers until I read this book, so it's interesting to get some extra insight into that journey along the various stages of his life. So Arnie was a super driven guy. If you read the book, you'll see that bodybuilding was the first sort of passion that drove him, and he only really got into that when he was 13, 14. He started, seeing these people who were successful in the sport, and he kind of idolized them. So he'd put up posters of all these people around him, all these people he admired, and that kind of drove him to taking up bodybuilding, and he would just relentlessly pursue that. So even when he was in the military, he snuck off the base to go and participate in the first bodybuilding competition, and he won that, and so he got in trouble, but he was just always willing to do whatever it took to to reach his goals and reach his dreams. And that kind of theme you see again and again in the book throughout his life. When he transitioned to movies, he was not a good actor. He had no training. He had no right to be in Hollywood. But it was just his persistence, and he found the people around him to train him, to mold him, give him tips, and he just went on that sort of mission. Moving through bodybuilding to making movies. Still doing lots of other things as well. He wasn't just a bodybuilder or a movie, star, but he had a real estate empire, and he had all kinds of investments you wouldn't know about. So he really was not just sharp in terms of his physical body and his training, but he was very sharp in his mind. He was able to do maths in his head to work out if a certain apartment office complex was going to be profitable for him based on the square footage and the asking price and the mortgage and the payments and things like that. So he was super sharp, and he was able to build up a successful real estate empire while he was bodybuilding, while he was acting, and then obviously while he was the governor as well. So it's a pretty impressive story. It's definitely worth reading. It's very inspiring to see how someone with no real formal training in anything can be successful. I think the discipline that his parents imposed on him, especially his father when they were young, making them do push-ups before breakfast, doing maths drills before school started, it really taught him to focus and be disciplined. And he obviously carried that through, doing 5-6 hours of bodybuilding a day, 6-7 days a week. I mean, that's just a crazy amount of discipline to have. So in terms of focus, he was definitely focused on one thing at a time. It was bodybuilding to start with, and then he got some money from that, got into the business side of it, obviously won some competitions, and then he got into investment. But throughout his life, he's done so many things that he's had a relentless focus on one thing at a time, and is able to do so much in one life. So now he's maybe 70 plus, and he's obviously I guess his career is winding down. I don't know what he's working on now, but he's not the perfect guy. He definitely, had some challenges balancing everything in his life. I think he was with Maria Shriver for most of his life, and she was a very career-minded woman, so I think it was a good match for him. They were able to support each other a lot. She was very savvy in the politic world, and so that helped him out when he ran for governor. And she was obviously a very good ally for him. So I think that they helped each other a lot, and they were able to make each other successful. And he's divorced now. I think that something came out that he fathered a child with a maid of their house, and that came out like after 14, 15 years. So he only covers that briefly in the last chapter, and that's I guess the side that everyone's going to look on and pick on and say, look at his flaws. So he's not perfect, but there's a lot of inspirational stuff to take away from the book. In terms of his attitude and his focus, and just his relentless pursuit of being the best in whatever he wanted to be. He would just do an endless amount of preparation for all his contests, all his Mr. Olympias, all his bodybuilding, and even acting. He just rehearse, and then when he was the governor, giving speeches, doing debates, he would just rehearse everything. So he was just super prepared for everything. And even if even if you start out, you're not that good, and you rehearse 10,000 times, well, you're gonna be pretty good at the end of that. So I think that's a takeaway, that it's just about, he calls it, it's just all about reps. So it's just about practicing. You do 10,000 reps, you're going to have, huge muscles. You do 10,000 reps and rehearsing anything else, and that's going to pay off for you. So he just took that approach from bodybuilding and applied it to everything else he did in life, and that's quite inspiring to see how that worked for him. So definitely check out the book. I would just look at the last chapter. He's got these Arnold rules and principles for success. So the first one he mentions, this is at the end of the book, is just turn your liabilities into assets. So he says that, when he started out in Hollywood, everyone told him it's not going to work because he has a weird sounding name, his accent's really weird, he's too big to play in the movies, no one's going to really understand him, it's going to be too weird. And then he did work on his accent to soften it a little bit, but he looked for these leading roles through, roles like Conan Barbarian and Terminator, and he used his body to his advantage, so he became this kind of, action star, and was able to, get paid very well for that. So definitely you can think about what people perceive as your liabilities, but I would say you don't have to change yourself to be successful. You can use your unique signature strengths to your advantages and try and play off those. Then the other one he says is when someone tells you no, you should hear yes. So that basically nothing's impossible. You don't listen to people when they tell you can't do something, but if your belief is strong enough, you will be able to overcome anything. And so the example he gives is when he's in politics, and obviously in politics, a lot of people say, you can't do this, you can't come in here and change up everything in 4 years. But he didn't let that stop him. He would just keep pushing and pushing. He had mixed success in politics, but I think he did achieve a lot, making climate change and renewable energy a massive focus in California. So that now I think they have the most solar power generated in the United States. And he had some infrastructure projects that he wanted to rebuild the city into a more modern city that's able to accommodate more people. So he did a lot, and I think anyone in his time is going to be super challenged. Going through a massive global recession like 2007 and 8, there's no one that's going to be able to have just 100% success in that kind of environment. It's going to be super challenging. Everyone's going to hate you. You have to cut spending. You're suddenly everyone's worst enemy. So he kind of covers on some of those things. But basically, his vision was stronger than other people's doubt. And I think that's the key takeaway. And if your vision is stronger than other people's doubt, it's just that relentless persistence is going to get you where you want to go in life. But if you let other people talk you out of things, you let them talk you down, then you've lost before you even started. So that's definitely a good principle. I like that one. He says the next one is never follow the crowd, go where it's empty. So he talks about when he started investing in property, he chose an area that was really unpopular and people saw it as a bad investment, which meant he could get it under the value of the general market around the area. So he always tried to do what's the opposite of popular, and I think you can apply that to investing. You can apply that to lots of things. If you're in a business with tons of competitors that are all doing exactly the same thing, how do you differentiate? You end up competing on price. You end up going into a horrible business model. So you want to be able to try and do something that not everyone else is doing, or do it in a way that it's hard for people to copy you. So that's definitely something I would say it's worth thinking about. How can you differentiate yourself, either your business or your investments, and try and do something that not everyone else is doing. If you're buying the stock market at the top after it's run up, doubled in value, then that's a sure way to kill yourself in the long term. So definitely don't follow the crowd. Look for what opportunities people are scared of, and then as long as you've done the math and you do your due diligence, you should follow your gut. You should you should try and not follow the crowd. Next one I like the most because it applies to the whole of his life and all his achievements. He says no matter what you do in life, selling is part of it. So he talks about all the different achievements he's made, but it's not just doing it and then laying back on your achievements, resting on your laurels. But he gives an example that in movies, most people do, they put a lot into their acting. The actors, do a lot of preparation. They shoot the movie, then they feel great, and then they think their job's done, and they let the studios, the distributors plan all the marketing. What he would do is he would actually get involved in all that side of it as well. So post-production, he saw that as his main focus. It's not just shooting the movie. He was able to, get involved in that process, look at the focus groups. Obviously, the focus groups give reviews of the movies, and then they tweak the movie, and then try and increase the popularity before they go live to increase the chances at the box office. So he saw the whole business side of it because he was into the real estate empire. He wasn't just an actor; he saw the numbers. He wanted to get involved in the business, and he saw that setting was super important. So I guess that starts with him having to set his body in bodybuilding and hit all the right poses, and you have to really be able to sell yourself and be confident in yourself in that sense. And then he got into some sales jobs. He started his own business in construction in America. So he had a sales experience, and he just kind of carried that through and understood that the job is never done. You can't let other people sell for you, because sometimes, like Total Recall, he says they shot a great movie, but the marketing team put together horrible trailers, and it was coming out with terrible reviews from the focus groups. So it was going to be a complete flop. And he said, look, we can't let these guys do it. Let's go hire an outside marketing firm, get them to rebrand the whole thing. They managed to lift the reviews massively before they before they released the movie, and it was a huge hit. So if he hadn't done those things, all the acting in the world wouldn't have helped. The movie would have flopped. It's really that first impression, that perception people get as to how viral a movie can go, and so you need to be always selling yourself, and you can't get away from that. It's always a part of life. So if you're not good at selling, you definitely need to be partnering with someone who is really good at selling. So I guess that's a challenge for a lot of businesses, is to find that person who's a good match, or to improve themselves to be able to sell better. And I think that just definitely comes with confidence and knowledge in what you're talking about. If the more knowledgeable I am about something, the more confident I feel to talk about it. And then you're always selling, whether you're aware of it or not. You're always selling yourself. Even when you have a conversation, you're selling your ideas, your beliefs to someone else. So either you're selling them or they're selling you. And that's kind of a popular expression I've heard. So it's either you're selling or you're being sold to, and that's how we go through life. So if you want to have success, you always have to understand the importance of selling, and don't just think your job is done after halfway through. So that's some of his success principles. Let me see if there's another one here. He has these 10 sort of rules. Never let pride get in your way. So I think it's easy for that to happen to all of us. We all have this ego and this being proud about something that we like, but it's the humility. I think Ty talks about that too. Ty Lopez in his 67 Sets program. You need to have the humility to recognize what you don't know, and seek out people that know more than you, and that's all about finding mentors and being humble. So if you let pride get in your way, you might stop learning. You might think you know everything. You might think, I don't need to read this guy. What does he know? I probably branded Schwarzenegger before this as just some dumb bodybuilder who got lucky in politics, and I might have thought, I don't need to read his book. What am I going to learn from him? So that would have got in my way of learning a lot of things I pulled out of the book. So you got to remember that you really can never know everything about anything. You can't know everything about everything. You can know a little bit about some things, and you should always look to increase your knowledge, in whatever area you're trying to improve, trying to grow. He gave an example that Muhammad Ali challenged him to like a contest just to see who was stronger, and he wanted to see how strong bodybuilders were. So he let Arnold push him up against the wall in front of his friends, and he didn't mind, being seen as weaker, because for him it wasn't about pride. He was just trying to learn something. So never let pride get in your way. Always look to people that can help you and help you grow, and don't be afraid to go for them and ask for help, and obviously offer something of value for that. So never let pride get in your way. I guess it's quite an obvious one, but a lot of us do it. He says don't overthink. And this, I guess, is a way that we talk ourselves out of doing something. Sometimes we have something we want to achieve, and then we start to think about it. We start to analyze it over and over again, and we start to doubt ourselves, or we start to raise all the negative points, like things that could go wrong. He says a lot of time people would come to him in real estate and point out to them all things that could go wrong with this investment, and he just didn't, he'd done his research, so he was sure enough that he wanted to do it. And if people keep overthinking it, you end up with paralysis. You don't take any action. So I guess there's a fine point between doing your due diligence and then not overthinking something, but just trying it out. And I've heard this from other people before, you can never be 100% ready for something. If you wait until you're 100% ready, probably someone else has already got ahead of you and started the idea. So when you're even 30-40% ready, you learn by iteration, you learn by doing, you learn by testing and improving as you go, and you can never be 100% prepared or ready for something. So I guess that's what it means by not overthinking. So that's his second point. And he gives some examples again, in property. The third one he says is forget Plan B. So this is, I guess, burning your bridges. If you don't have any alternatives, you'll be so committed to what is your primary focus. He did that a lot in politics, where there's always compromise between Democrats, Republicans. For what you want to achieve, you have to compromise to get anything done. But he was very, very firm about, this is our plan A, this is what we're pushing for. If you have a plan B, it means you're not going to commit enough to plan A. So I think that you can. It's not like you're stuck to something. If something's not working, you can always change it. But if you give yourself an easy option out, like a plan B, then maybe you're not going to be focused enough on what is the primary goal, the primary focus. So you can apply that to business. You can apply that to a sales strategy. You can apply that to any kind of decision or goal you have. You want to achieve in life. But to have one focus, and not to spread yourself too thin. To say, let's focus on this plan B. So that kind of explains his really persistent focus, because he only had one plan. He only ever had the plan A, and he had no plan B, and that's why he was able to achieve so much, he says. So don't have that fallback plan, because that gives you an easy way to escape or not to do what's difficult. His fourth one is quite funny because it's kind of his character. He says you can use outrageous humor to settle a score. He was quite famous for putting his foot in it a lot when he come out with political speeches, just off the cuff, saying things that were very insulting. So he did make a few gaffes, but his humor, people loved it. He was able to use it, to get people to like him, not just in acting, but in politics. And he says that they're able to diffuse a lot of the tension. So he was able to use that humor. If you have that in your character, he was a bigger than life kind of guy. So he had this outrageous humor, and he was able to use that to his advantage. And he was able to win a lot of arguments, or make people like him that way. So if you have a humorous character, then you can definitely use that in your favor. See what the next one is here. He says the day has 24 hours, and that means that his guy was on the go all the time. He obviously he slept and he ate, but if you look at his schedule, the thing is he was juggling. His guy was just non-stop, boom, 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 doing one thing to another: family, acting, Hollywood, bodybuilding, everything all together. And he didn't find it stressful, he says, because obviously he was passionate about everything he was doing. So I think he could never understand why people would come to him and say, I'm really stressed out. This is really really tough life. How do I juggle everything? He was like, are you crazy? He didn't have that problem. So if you're really passionate about what you're doing, I think you don't feel the stress as much. And he gives an example of students who were complaining about their tuition going up, and they had to get jobs while they were studying. And he was like, what's wrong with that? He gave an example of how he studied while he was bodybuilding, while he was working, and he was able to juggle all those things. So he thinks that probably most people are too soft, and we don't take full advantage of all the hours in the day. So if the day has 24 hours, you need to sleep 6. You got 18 hours left to hustle and get all those things done. So I don't think he ever had much downtime. He was whatever he was doing, he was into it 100%, and he was really focused. So use that time in your day, and don't just complain the government's not going to support you, and you don't want to get a job, so you want the government to pay for your tuition fees, or pay for your way. So don't expect them to pay for you. Use the time that you have efficiently. The sixth point he has is reps, reps, reps. So this is really about repetition and practicing and rehearsing for something. You got to refine your craft. You got to hone it. You got to put in a lot of hours. For some of the movies he would prepare, he'd be training martial arts for months with all kinds of different people for Conan the film movie, and he would just be doing stunt after stunt after stunt, and they would maybe practice it 10, 15 times before they'd actually shoot it live for the cameras for his movies. So he was very good at understanding the importance of that, and obviously with bodybuilding, it's all about reps. You spend 5 hours a day in the gym bodybuilding to get that kind of figure he does. So you cannot expect results. In the gym, he liked to have a list of all the reps and exercises he's going to do, and then he'd mark them off as he goes. So it's like a game. You're kind of recognizing that achievement, and that keeps you motivated. And that was one of his tips for keeping you driven. Otherwise, you might go to the gym, you might feel tired, you might already have a goal for what you want to achieve, and you give up or you leave early. But this guy's able to spend 4 or 5 hours a day in the gym, and obviously that was how he did it. So that was quite inspiring. Obviously applies even for speeches. He would rehearse before he gave a speech. Maybe see here, he's got one speech he rehearsed like 50 times. So by the time he delivers it, he's fluent. He's professional. and people don't see the practice that goes in; they just see the end product. So they think, oh, maybe he's a natural speaker, but he could be the most nervous guy, and he's just practiced 50 times. The next point he makes is, don't blame your parents. If they've left you with problems, they're your problems to solve. And I think that, it's not just parents, but we blame everyone. We blame, we blame the country we're in, we blame society, we blame, other people, our boss, and all that blame basically, it puts you in a position of being out of control of your destiny, of your life. If you're always blaming people, then it's out of your control to change that. But if you recognize, this is your life, this is what you have, this is where you're starting from, and you have the belief in yourself that it's up to you to improve your life and no one else can really stop you, then suddenly you have this control back in your life. And so it's really important not to blame other people and blaming your parents for, whatever they did wrong to you. And the example he gave is that his parents were quite tough to him, especially his dad. And, when he looked back on his life, it was the discipline that his father imposed on him that he thought at the time was difficult and tough, but it turned him into such a successful person. So the things that we perceive sometimes as being bad for you or traumatizing us actually make you a lot stronger. And definitely in my life, that's very true as well. That the hardships I've gone through has made me a better person in terms of more successful, more focused. It took a really shitty job for me to, end up thinking about quitting my job and starting my own business. So you got to think about the challenges you face. Instead of blaming, look at what can you learn from that. What's the opportunity there? So I like that one. That's quite true for me. A couple more here. His next one is change takes big balls. So he gives an example of Gorbachev that dismantled the Soviet Republic because he could see the problems with the system, and he's asking Gorbachev how did he do it. And so he was just basically giving examples of if you want to tackle something big, and especially in government, in politics, you need to be very firm to your convictions. You let people talk you out of things, you'll never get anything done. And so any kind of big change on a big scale, if you have big goals, it's going to take firm conviction. So that's definitely something you see in the book again and again as well. The next one is take care of your body and your mind. So obviously he's really good at taking care of his body, but people don't recognize how sharp he was in his mind. Like I said before, he was forced by his dad to do math drills, him and his brother. So they were very good at mental math. He always was like a sponge when he was exposed to something new. So when he became the governor, he surrounded himself with smarter people and basically, had briefings after briefings for debates and things where he wanted to be super prepared. So he always understood the importance of training your mind, and he was super smart, mentally, not just physically. And that's going to lead you to success. So you can't neglect your mind, and that's all about this challenge I'm doing at the moment to try and read more and learn more from brilliant people, from successful people. You can never stop learning, otherwise you're going backwards. And equally, if you're super intelligent, you can't neglect your body, your physical body, because you're not gonna have a great life if you do that either. So I think there's one more here. It says stay hungry. So you got to stay hungry to be successful. If you achieved a lot, you kind of rest on your laurels. You can get lazy. I think in my business I've been quite lucky to automate a lot of it, and so I haven't had to put as much time in working hours as I did in my job, and so I've used that time for other things. But after a while you start to think about, how can I grow it to the next level, what can I do, and you got to find something that's going to keep you driven and keep you hungry. So I think the thing that's working now is if you have a goal bigger than yourself, and you have a cause bigger than yourself. And Vishen Lakhiani talks about this in Bending Reality. If you have a cause bigger than yourself, that's going to give you the drive to pull you forward, to have these big goals and help you stay hungry. But if your vision is small, you're just worried about yourself and your paycheck and your house and your car and these things. It's a very small vision. It's not going to drive you to achieve great things. So he was obviously staying hungry throughout his career, wanting to do bigger things, better things. He had a goal to double his paycheck for every movie he created. So he created like a game for himself, always trying to outdo himself. And in the end, you're not just competing against other people, you're competing against yourself, because you can't really judge yourself against other people, but you can look at your progression as an individual against where you were and where you want to be. So, and what you want to do for the world, how you want to grow the world, what you want to contribute. So that having a bigger vision definitely helps you to stay hungry, and I think that's great advice. So yeah, so that's some of the tips, some of the things I learned. It's a good book. It's quite long, so quite happy to have sped read it, and it didn't take so long. But yeah, if you like to read about successful people, then I would pick up his book. It's you know, it's very contemporary, so it's one of those people that's been around in my generation. It's quite inspiring to see what people are able to do, and I think I'm going to be reading more biographies to fill my head with more inspiring thoughts. And so I'm sharing another book review soon. So that's it, and enjoy.